by 2050, we're going to have a totally different understanding of our place in the solar system by understanding whether or not there has been or there still is life in our solar system elsewhere other than Earth.
That is the big question, is are we alone in the universe? And if we can use our brains to develop technology to determine that, we're gonna go for it.
As technology progresses forward, there's going to be an in-space infrastructure. There's going to be colonies, lunar outposts, for example.
Setting up bases on the moon will be inevitable. If you realize how much easier it is to escape the moon's gravitational pull versus Earth, then you can more easily fuel your rockets on the moon, and then exploring the rest of the solar system would be so much easier.
I can see this coming in the 2050s, where we're now thinking differently about how we design spacecraft altogether.
If we go outer space, obviously robots have the advantage. It might actually be the way where we can slowly and gradually get robots into more and more complicated tasks. Is how do you augment what the robots can do with also the intelligence that you...
It would be possible for robots to land on Venus. It's not possible for humans because it's so hot. Maybe I wouldn't go there, but I would send some robots to do all the hard work for me.
Human beings in 30 years actually on Mars. We've actually had human footprints on the surface.
There's so much out there to expand on, to explore. And I want to see people still push the envelopes on that, still bring the brightest minds to the technology sector to really push for that. The only place to go for us now is up.
What do we get out of exploring space or developing our space technologies? Well, one of the benefits we get out of this is we develop technologies that allow us to make use of space and near-Earth space platforms for astronomical observation. For example, one thing we could do is we can take advantage of the far side of the moon. On the far side of the moon, a radio telescope is protected from any radio noise coming from Earth. So now we have a much more pristine environment for radio astronomy to be done. We also can develop technologies for spacecraft for astronomical research instrumentation to be even farther out in the solar system, just because we've developed our capability to build bigger instruments because we're now working off the planet.
We'll be able to do scientific observations from the moon, send spacecraft from the moon, build it on the moon, lowering the cost and enabling more resources.
Asteroid mining has been talked about in science fiction for a long time. I think what we realized recently is that we've seen a revolution in space as a whole. You've seen the cost of launch come down, and other pieces of technology have got to a maturity level that's far enough along where we could really take a stab at doing this. Obviously, mining is a big part of human history, right? And we've had a lot of problems with mining as a whole. Let's be honest, the technique of open pit mining, which is primarily how platinum is mined, is to dig a giant hole in the earth, destroy the environment around it, create a ton of CO2 pollution. The ability to mine on Earth is also becoming more limited, right? Ore resources are depleting. We're not finding as many deposits as we had before, and the deposits we are finding, the concentrations are much lower than we would expect. There's definitely a push that we need to make to be able to secure these metals for the future.
When it comes to mining precious metals on Earth, the locations are very limited to where you can do that. So take platinum group metals, for example. It's really only located in Russia and in parts of South Africa. But when you take that out of Earth and out into the solar system, there's an immeasurable amount of bodies out there that you can mine. And because of that, there's really an immeasurable amount of these precious metals, these platinum group metals that exist out there. There is an asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and that contains the majority of the asteroids in the solar system. You have bodies from there because of collisions or just orbital deviations that they end up going closer, and those are near-Earth objects, near the asteroids. Those are the ones that hit Earth and made the dinosaurs extinct. Like those objects, those asteroids come closer, and those account for a smaller subset. And by a smaller subset, there's still over 1 million of these things, right?
By the end of this decade, we want to have fully demonstrated that we can refine platinum group metals from an asteroid and bring them back to Earth to be sold. The next decade, we're really going to talk about scaling and expanding that operation to a point where it does become a major resource that we're bringing back to Earth that we can help leverage the economy with. When we get into the 40s and 50s, the vision would be is that hopefully society has become a multiplanetary species at that point, and we can help do things like provide Mars with the resources it needs to make a stable, hospitable community on that planet, and other things as we go forward. That's really what we see in the future. We want to feed Earth now, but in the future, feed the rest of the universe.
If we enable the in-space economy, that's a huge win. And that's not just providing materials, if we can provide water, and not just to Earth, but to these outposts, to these colonies, to these spacecraft that live out there, to these in-space manufacturing facilities. If we're able to provide material to all this future infrastructure that lives out there, that would be amazing. And I think we do live in that world. It's trending towards that.
The Clipper mission is gonna launch in 2024, and it's a huge spacecraft with a lot of instruments, and all the instruments are essentially gonna look for if there are habitats within Europa that can maintain life, and microbial life specifically. Europa is one of like 80 moons around Jupiter, and it appears that there may be an ocean world within Europa, and Europa has an icy crust, icy surface to it. There's potentially life on Europa. It's gonna take about 6 years for us to get to Jupiter, and the spacecraft has to do a Mars-Earth gravity assist to get there. And we won't be into the actual Jupiter orbit insertion until 2030s. And then our first flyby is gonna be around 2030s, 2031, but it's gonna be about 50 of them. And the closest approach to Europa is actually gonna be, I think, 16 miles above the surface. So it's gonna be pretty close. My hope, though, is with a combination of all the instruments on Europa Clipper, that we will find signs of life and hopefully see that it is habitable in the current day and not just past life.
We should take advantage of the elements that are available in space. And now it becomes the matter of moving it from one planet to another planet, moving it from one orbit to another orbit. So now we need to move in space. Spaceflight is bringing on-demand cargo delivery to space, from the Earth to the Moon and anywhere in between, by building a network of rockets in space that allows moving from one orbit to another orbit without having to keep going back to the Earth. By the year 2050, we are going to be spacefaring civilization. Meaning that if today we have 4,000, 5,000 working assets in space, you're probably gonna have million assets in space, and not just in low Earth orbit, deep space, different planets. And now that turns into a problem that requires frequent visits to our assets, frequent management. And that is a technology that we do not have today. We need this infrastructure.
I see a world that has solved climate change and is recovering from climate change. I see us moving out into the solar system. I see a city in Mars in 2050. I believe that will happen.
I hope that they've learned the power of the human imagination, that it is the one tool that averts existential calamity, our ability to imagine the world different, imagine it otherwise. And I like to imagine that there's a world where they've really tapped into that.
I hope that more interest and funding goes towards scientific institutions. If you're funding educational institutions that ultimately do benefit the collective mass, then I would love to see more of all of the world's spending go towards that.
If we keep this trajectory going, with all the things that we're trying to adjust, all the things we're trying to fix, I think by 2050, we will be in a better position than we are now. The oceans should be cleaner.
I hope that they figured out how to make robots and people coexist, but also co-working together. You know, you have to use technology for the right things and use human for the right things. And I hope that the balance is somewhat kept.
we have time to transition. We have time to learn and change, and that industry and business will adapt to it. Yes, it can bring energy and it can bring innovation, and of course it can help combat climate change, but to also help bring peace to the planet and avoid conflict is, I think, one of the most beautiful aspects.
It might be that we have a lot of problems today, but I'm optimistic. I believe that the future is bright